and welcome back to Mason Sports Insider post-spring break. I'm Tyler Byram alongside with Dan Ward. Normal episode for you today, no ask and tell questions or tournament previews. We do have some recaps though of the Atlantic 10 tournaments, as well. I'll look into some other Mason teams who are currently in the middle of their season: men's volleyball, baseball, and tennis.
It's good to be back, Tyler. Hope you had a good spring break. I know I did. Hope all of you had a good spring break. Let's jump right into it because we have a lot of action to catch up on.
Yep, let's go ahead and get started with the men's basketball team. Many people thought the men's basketball team this season would have the chance to advance past the first round of the Atlantic 10 tournament for the first time in team history, being that this is the third season that Mason was in the Atlantic 10 Conference. A lot of people thought that they would have a good chance to do so by facing the number 13 seed St. Louis Billikens, while Mason was number 12 seed. However, Mason is against a team that they had won one game and lost a game against in the regular season. So let's go ahead and take a look at the game. In the game, both Mason and St. Louis seemed to be timid in the opening minutes, but a few steals eventually got St. Louis going. Their three-point game pulled the Billikens up at half, 32-23, and were led by Marcus Bartley, who had an incredible 14 points in the opening frame. Mason would continue to get into the deficit, but could never overcome the hump, as the Billikens would always respond with a dagger three-pointer. In the final minute, the Patriots gave St. Louis a run for their money after being down 9 with under a minute to go. Marco Guanicic would hit this three to bring Mason within one possession, but the Billikens finished the game off 3 from 4 at the line and clinched the game win for them 83-79. All the starters for the Patriots were in double figures, and they were led by Marquise Moore, who had 17 points and 4 assists, Siobhan Thompson, who had his 13th double-double of the season with 10 points, 15 rebounds, as well as Marco Guanicic, who had a double-double with 13 points and 11 rebounds. However, they were not enough, to overcome Marcus Brantley, who had, again, an incredible game, had 24 points and finished 7 from 8 from downtown. So that concludes the men's basketball season. They finished 11-21 on the year, 5-13 in the Atlantic 10, their best conference record ever, and that includes the 4-12 that they had their inaugural season in the A10, just mere percentage points better, but still better. And they also had 2 more victories than they did last year. So when you're thinking about went from Coach A to Coach B, whole new philosophy coming in, a lot of players leaving, the fact that they were able to do better this year is actually a good sign for the program going forward.
Without a doubt, record-wise, they actually did better, which when you have a new coach and new players, you don't necessarily expect that, so that's a plus. But also the style of play that they did and the type of games that they were in were a lot better games. They were more competitive. The Eagle Bank Arena was rocking. Maybe it was because of the new game, but I really think it was because of the team. So the fact that their games were more competitive and they were playing constantly competitively against teams, that was a great sign as well. So really a win in the record category as well as the way the team played.
Yeah, unfortunately though for Mason, they will say goodbye to 2 of their starters on the year. They will be losing Siobhan Thompson and Marco Guanicic. They will also say goodbye to Julian Royal and Michael Rudy. And those are 2 guys. Julian Royal, a big transfer coming in for Georgia Tech. A lot of people had a lot of hype from him, but it never developed. From when he got to Mason, he seemed to battle injuries a lot of the time, and it just never worked out for him.
Yeah, exactly right. Sometimes that happens with certain players. A lot of hype around him, unfortunately, as you said, didn't work out for him. Michael Rudy, shame to see him go. He was always, his name is Rudy. He kind of fits the description perfectly, always the guy you cheered for, wanting to come in late in games. But the loss of Thompson and Guanicic are going to be something that they're going to have to come up with. A lot of rebounds missing, a lot of points scored. But it'll also bring a new style to the team next year, as the team will play a little bit more small ball now that 2 of their big men are out of the paint.
And it's kind of more of Paulson's philosophy if you look back to his Bucknell days. The team will still have Otis Livingston Jr., who was named to the Atlantic 10 All-Rookie team over spring break. They will also have the freshman Jair Greer and DeAndre Abram. So those guys bringing back a good, solid freshman base, as well as Marquise Moore has been a starter since he was a freshman, as well as Jalen Jenkins, who will be his senior year as well. He also made the all-rookie team back in his first season. So a lot of guys, good thing to build the program on, but it will be a different look. They're going to have to make shots next year.
Definitely.
They won't have Siobhan be able to bail them out on the offensive board. So they will have a whole lot more things to do. But also, Daniel Ravallo will be coming back for the team next year.
Yeah, the Portuguese national team product had to sit out this season due to injury, but he'll be back next season. Danny Dixon, if he's able to bulk up, build a little muscle, I like the way the team's playing. So they may have some big men right away to fill in those shoes.
Yeah, hopefully that is the way for the team. Meanwhile, St. Joseph's would go on to win the Atlantic 10 championship by upsetting Dayton in the semifinals and eventually beating VCU 87-74. The game was not as close as that score indicates. And just a dominating performance for the Hawks, and really from start to finish, just there's not much to say. Just go back and watch the game. St. Joseph's dominated. They are going to be a very, very hard team to beat in the NCAA tournament, and they'd be able to sneak in and beat some of those top tier teams. All three of the teams I mentioned, St. Joe's, Dayton, and VCU, will go on to play in the NCAA tournament. St. Joseph's, they have a first round matchup against number 9 Cincinnati. If they would win that game, they will most likely go on to play Oregon. Then VCU, a 10 seed, will play number 7 Oregon State. If they win, they will most likely play Oklahoma. And then we have number 7 Dayton versus number 10 Syracuse. A lot of controversy about Syracuse getting into the tournament, and as well as St. Bonaventure not getting in. We won't talk about that. But anyways, if they were to win, they will most likely go on to place the number 2 seed in Michigan State. So what do you feel about these matchups going forward?
First of all, congrats to St. Joe's. I grew up rooting for them, being from the Philadelphia, South Jersey area, so I am happy for them. Phil Martell continuing to dominate that program as the head coach. You mentioned earlier that St. Joe's probably has the best odds of the 3 A-10 teams to go further on. All 3 of them have good chances winning their first game, but that second game, Oregon, although they are number 1 seed, they're a very talented team playing exceptional basketball this year. I feel like I would rather play them as opposed to Michigan State and Oklahoma, who have been dominant all year long, and you know how good they can be. So it'll be interesting. I think all of them will get past the first round, make it into that second round. But those second round games are going to be tough. I don't know how much the A-10 will be represented after that second round.
Yeah, a lot of people thought that the Atlantic 10 got gypped when it came to the NCAA tournament. Only 3 teams in, the highest seed being Dayton, who was 7. A lot of people early on, I remember a couple weeks ago, of course, Dayton went and lost a couple games, but they were sitting at number 4, number 5 seed in the tournament. Fall to a 7. St. Joseph's, who won the conference, is only at an 8. A lot of controversy going on there. St. Bonaventure not getting in after finishing the season with a tie for the Atlantic 10 regular season title, but they get an NIT bid, very high bid for them in that one. So
it's always next year.
Yeah, there's always next year, but there's a lot of basketball still yet to come. A lot of basketball for all you college basketball fans.
Exactly right, and there's more basketball on the women's side as well. So let's talk about your George Mason Patriots, who play women's basketball. They finished the season with a record of 12-19 and a conference record of 6-10. That's 1 more conference win than they had a season ago, and it was good enough to finish them 9th in the standings after they were only projected to finish 11th at the start of the season. They made history for George Mason basketball by being the first team for either program to not have to play in the Wednesday game and to make it to the Friday game, which we'll talk about in a minute. As I said, they played their game on Thursday against the number 8 seed, Dayton, and they were able to beat the Dayton Flyers 66-62, thanks in large part to 25 points from Taylor Brown, and they advanced to the quarterfinals of the A-10 tournament, again, a first for either pro basketball program at Mason. Unfortunately, the run ended there for the Patriots, as they fell in the quarterfinals to the eventual champion George Washington Colonials. The quarterfinals was the final game for superstar Taylor Brown, who will go down as one of the greatest Mason basketball players of all time. She is the 2nd all-time scorer in program history with 1,693 points, and that came in only 3 seasons. She's also the first player in program history to have 1,500 points, 400 rebounds, and 300 assists. She holds a single-season record with 643 points in a season. She's the fastest player in program history to 1,000 points, in which it only took her 50 games. She's 6th all-time in three-pointers made and 8th all-time in assists. That's only some of the facts right there. I know that was a lot, but she holds numerous records. She's been a treat to watch and has been phenomenal for the Patriots. If she had been able to play 4 seasons at George Mason, she would have been blowing away records even more. Also graduating and leaving the team this year are Christy Makube and Rihanna Muhammad, a couple of big players this season, as they have been for their entire career. So we'll see who can fill their shoes as well next season.
Yeah, I feel like the women's basketball team is very similar to the men's in that they're losing some of their playmakers. Losing Taylor Brown, losing Christy Makube. They're going to be huge shoes that the team is going to have to fill in the offseason and maybe even find it from your bench. But I believe the optimism for the team is still very high. They have a lot of good players on the team. There's Kara Wright, Taylor Dodson, Bridget O'Donnell, just to name a few. I still think the trend is upward for George Mason. Nyla Millicent's trying to build her program together. And remember, Taylor Brown wasn't Nyla Millicent's recruit. She came in when the old coach was in for the Patriots. So I think things are still looking up for them. I'm glad that they were able to beat Dayton in another revolutionary rivalry matchup against the Colonials. It's just GW's dominating that competition this year.
Yeah, George Washington will be a team to look out for in the NCAA tournament. But going back to Mason real quick, as you said, next season can be another great season for him. It will be interesting, though, because Taylor Brown has been the leader of this team for the last 3 seasons. Now, all of a sudden, you lose 14 points a game, 4 assists per game, and 4 rebounds a game. You have to fill that somewhere. Kara Wright definitely has the ability to do so, and Coach Millicent is very high on Wright. But she doesn't have that same quickness, and there's nobody else on this team on the current roster where you say, wow, the other team's going on a big run, give the ball to Brown, go make a layup real quick to end the run, or here, quick, pull up for 3 so that we can finally slow down the run. So that will be the most interesting part. However, they're very talented. Tiffany Pageant, all of the redshirt juniors, Janeri Bell, phenomenal season, looking forward to the rest of her career at Mason. So they do have a very strong core of players coming back. They will have to have some voids to fill, but you're definitely right that Coach Millicent has come into this program and is really building it up in the positive direction.
We'll have more to talk about for the women's basketball team. The NCAA tournament selection is later tonight. Actually, I'm filming. It will probably already be out by the time you see this show. Of course, George Washington, with winning the Atlantic 10 Conference, they are going to be into the tournament. Also look at Duquesne to begin an at-large spot. But also some teams on the bubble, St. Bonaventure and St. Louis. You got to feel for the Bonnies if they don't get into it. I mean, you got, after yesterday, you have to give it to the women's team. You have to put them in. But anyways, we'll have more about women's basketball next week. Limited capacity, of course, we'll only be talking about A10. But
of course. So now let's move on to the wrestling team, who we haven't talked about in a while. They celebrated Senior Day way back when on February 21st. The Patriots lost to American 27-11, but seniors Vincent Rodriguez and Blake Rubio both picked up wins in their final home match of their Mason careers. They then got set for the EWL Championships on Saturday, March 5th in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. They finished 6th as a team, but they did have some strong performances. 6 wrestlers finished in the top 4 of their weight classes, including Ryan Force and Greg Flournoy, who finished 3rd. Matt Voss finished his impressive redshirt freshman campaign with a 4th place finish after losing to the number 1 seed in the semifinals. While the team has finished wrestling this season, one man is not done, and that is Greg Flournoy, who has qualified for the NCAA Championships and will be wrestling at Madison Square Garden on Thursday, March 17th. So a big congratulations and best of luck to Flournoy. We know you'll represent Mason well and make us proud. Mason will now head into the offseason with some questions to be answered. Although Captain Sahid Kargbo will most likely return after redshirting the season, the team loses some program pillars in Rodriguez and Flournoy, who are both on and off the mat leaders of this team, and they'll be looking for new talent to come in and fill their shoes, essentially, in order for them to have a successful season next year.
yeah, with Sahid Kargbo, he didn't play this year because he's trying to make the Olympic team. So that's a good reason to be missing your collegiate season. I believe it hurt the Patriots a little bit, but I mean, they knew this going in, and they played really well, wrestled really well, excuse me. But I mean, I got to give it to Flournoy. He made it to NCAA champion, 2nd year in a row. That it was Kedler last year. Now he's doing it this year. Good for them to be going forward with Flournoy. I'm excited for what the team can do next year as well. I mean, they're only losing 2 guys. They got a lot of younger guys in to get a lot of experience this year. So we'll have to see what they do going forward.
Exactly. They had a lot of players wrestle this year, a lot of depth on the team. And as Tyler mentioned, not losing a ton of players, so that means that they'll be able to fill in their shoes, hopefully rather nicely. Congratulations to a great season, Vince Rodriguez, and we'll be updating you on how Greg Flournoy does next week.
All right, now going back to the hardware, we turn our attention to the men's volleyball team. As just like the wrestling team, it's been a while since we've talked about them, so here's an update on the team. The team is currently 7-10 overall, 3-4 in the EIBA conference. Most recently, they've come off losses against St. Francis with a 0-3 set score and lost to Penn State 1-3. They also beat the New Jersey Institute of Technology 3-2 and beat Princeton by the score of 3-0. This most recently came off a weekend when they were 2-0. This was the first weekend going into spring break. Brian Negron was named the Offensive Player of the Week. For the first time in his career, he won a weekly accolade for the EIBA. Surprising to say that, actually. He had a career high in assists in the New Jersey Institute of Technology game with 57, as well as 36 the next day against Princeton. Just being able to do that back-to-back days is just absolutely incredible. Like I said, this was his first weekly academic award after being the newcomer of the year for the EIVA last season. And it's a good time for the Mason Patriots because this is the first time that they seem to be healthy. That a lot of their attackers are back. Their attacking percentage has gone up, and I think with Jack Wilson, Christian Elias, Rastislav Popov, and Paco Velez all being able to work into the lineup and come in at pivotal times, and especially with EIVA being a lot of back-to-back games, game on Friday night, game on Saturday night, it should be good for them. The only person that isn't back on the injury bug has to be Graham Gresham.
Then great. That's awesome to hear because the team definitely will need to get healthy because I believe they have 10 games remaining and 7 of them are against the EIVA opponents. And we'll be taking a look at the standings in a little bit, but you'll see how jam-packed it is. It's really anybody's conference to be won. Anybody can make the playoffs really this year other than the University of Charleston, who's in their first year. Is that correct?
First year in the EIVA.
Yeah, so they're still working out some kinks. But otherwise, there's 8 teams competing for 4 spots, and it's going to be exciting to see how they finish it off.
Yeah, I mean, they've been away from Mason for a long time, so they'll be able to come back home, a good homecoming for them. It won't be this weekend, however, because they will have Conference Carolina opponents King and Pfeiffer, and then they will return home where they will face nationally ranked UC Irvine on Tuesday. That'll be a game. Mason fans, if you in any sort of way like volleyball, you need to head over to the rack for that one because that'll be a fun one to watch. Let's go ahead and take a look at the standings that Dan mentioned, and no surprise, Penn State still at the top. Many thought Mason could dethrone him this year. That does not appear to be the case in the regular season. We still have a long way to go, especially in the postseason as well. But they're 7-0, 12-4 overall. Mason all the way down in 5th place. Like I said, 3-4, 7-10. But it is just an all-out battle. Really from, you could even throw Harvard in there, from 2nd place down to 7th.
Exactly. 2 games separating number 2 Harvard and number 7 Princeton. Everybody is right in it. Mason is supposed to be up there in the top 4, but right now struggling a little bit. But as again dealing with injuries, new coach, new system, I have 100% confidence that they'll be back in the playoffs. But again, very jam-packed. It's really anybody's game. New Jersey Institute of Technology only 5 wins overall, but 4 have come in the EIVA play. They suddenly appear like a team that's going to be competing this year. So it's going to be fun this last stretch of the volleyball season, without a doubt.
Yeah, we see Mason with the 2nd best record out of conference going into EIVA play, so that could be one of the tiebreakers at the end of the year.
Now let's move on to the baseball team, who is off to a rough start to the season, to say the least. Entering this past weekend, they were 2-10, and they dropped 2 of 3 to the winless Siena College Saints this past weekend. The offense looked great at the beginning of the season where they averaged 6 runs a game, but the pitching staff, which has averaged 7 runs for the entirety of this season, has struggled, and that doesn't even include the games against Siena. Suddenly, the offense has gone cold, only scoring 3 runs or fewer in 7 of their last 9 games, and that includes 3 shutouts. So easily, it's able to be said that pitching is the biggest issue for the baseball team. Their offense is doing pretty well, and actually against Siena, they came back and they did well. They scored 5 runs the one game, 7 runs another game, so their offense is starting to get back into it, but not a good start, to say the least, for baseball.
Yeah, and part of that, I mean, with the pitching, they really only have one pitcher coming back in Tyler Zombro. He pitched 8 shutout innings of a 2-hit baseball over the weekend. The offense, I mean, that's the best part of the team right now. I mean, in years past, it's been kind of I wouldn't say Achilles heel, but that's been the thing that the team needs to work on. And starting pitching has been dominant. This year, lost all the seniors, lost all the experienced guys that were getting wins for the team, and now you have freshmen and sophomores who either were the closer or trying to just make the team, or now having to step up in huge roles and starting.
Yeah, it's a sophomore-led team, to say the least. They relied on a lot of freshmen a year ago. Fortunately, there are some positives. Brandon Gum is getting back and healthy. He was the number 3 hitter for the team last year. He's in his senior season, and now that he's getting healthy, he had an excellent weekend against Siena as a DH. It'll be interesting to see what Coach Bill Brown does, if he's going to go back to shortstop or continue to be a DH. We'll see. Brady Acker, who's averaging .352 batting average this season, did hurt himself over, I believe, the last weekend. So he didn't play against Siena, which is a little concerning for the team because the offense is doing great, and it's been Brady Acker that's been the centerpiece of that offense. So we'll see if he can come back healthy. Hopefully he'll be all right. But the offense was fantastic last year. It led them. Again, the pitching staff was the issue last year, and they just have yet to figure it out. The starting pitching has been fairly solid. Tyler Zombro, Joe Williams both had good outings this past weekend, but the bullpen right now just needs to figure something out. A lot of time left before conference play, and as with the majority of the sports, conference play is really what's important, but they're going to have to do something to shake things up over there at Spooler Field.
They're going to have to find a way to bring it all together,
yes.
Especially when A-10 season comes around. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the men's and women's tennis team. Currently, the men's team is 4-7 overall, 0-3 in the Atlantic 10, however. Conference play doesn't really matter as much in tennis as it does in other sports. They lost to VCU by a set score of 7-0. And then over spring break, they went to the Hilton Head and went 2-2 on the weekend with wins over Northward and Edinburgh. They lost to the number 3 D2 team in the country, Armstrong State, by a score of 5-1. And they actually had a victory in that one. And that was in number 1 doubles with Joe Hill and James Lange. So now with their starting rotation kind of being set, not really at this point. We aren't there yet, but these are the guys that have been competing for the most part for Mason. We have Aaron Capitel at number 1, Joe Hill number 2, James Lange 3, Tanner Blaine 4, Giallo Buzano at 5, and Luke Maxwell at 6. You're also mixing in the senior and Connor Moran in there as well, just wherever you can fit them, trying to get some guys rest. But yeah, for them, it's just that they're trying to figure it out. 4-7, 0-3 in Atlantic 10, but there's a lot more matches to come up for them.
Yeah, and also what it comes down to is figuring out strategy, as you mentioned with tennis. Who do you play where, and who's the right guy to be that number 1? Who's the right guy to be that number 6? And how you're going to be able to set them up to have the most chance of success. A lot more strategy than you'd think in tennis, and I'm still learning myself, and it's great to learn and watch. But the team, I think the team will be okay moving forward because, as you said, they're working on some things, but they're getting some good wins against good teams. Yes, Division II opponent, that makes it sound a little less with the loss to Armstrong State, but they're still a very good tennis team in Armstrong State. So, we'll see how it goes moving forward, but they're definitely battling, and that's at least something that you can be proud of.
Yeah. And on the women's team, very similar situation for them. They are 3-10 overall in the spring season, 0-4 in the Atlantic 10. They went to Hilton Head, and they were 2-2 as well with wins over Savannah State and Edinburgh. They lost to defending D2 national champion in Armstrong State. That score is 5-0. But just for them, it's a very similar situation. A lot of people had optimism for the teams going into this spring season, especially after the encouraging performances of the team in the Atlantic 10 Championship, and it just hasn't been there. But again, the teams are trying to figure out their lineup, and you can say the same on the women's side, because at number 1 you have Brittany Pilkington, 2 Sydney Green, 3 Morgan Yang, 4 Eshu Erdenbat, 5 Scarlett Walton, and at 6 is Nicole Highwood. And working into that, you have a lot of people who haven't played much this season in Olivia Lamsey Thompson, Jane Awad, and Marique Bowers. So those are 3 people that I would have as potentially 2, 4, and 5 just going forward, and they aren't playing. This was the last match, so of course things have been different throughout the season, but they're trying to figure things out as well.
And that's sometimes just what it comes down to, is that some teams have it figured out, and other teams are rebuilding, other teams are working with what they have, trying to figure out the right mesh of players, and that's just kind of how it is with the tennis teams right now. Still a lot of time and a lot of tennis to be played, so we'll see what happens.
Yep.
But that will wrap things up for this week's edition of Mason Sports Insider. Here's a look at this week's upcoming schedule.
Yep, as we mentioned in the men's volleyball, they will have a game upcoming next weekend against UC Irvine, but some weird Tuesday games for the men's tennis team playing Mount St. Mary's, and baseball hosting Longwood. As well, on Thursday we have Greg Flournoy. He's starting off his NCAA championship run there as well. That will last throughout the weekend, depends on how far he goes in that.
Represent Greg Flournoy. And then over the weekend, baseball, if you want to check out some baseball games, they have a 3-game set against Longwood, as well as softball getting things going, hosting the Cherry Blossom Classic. They'll play Cornell, Canisius, St. Francis, and Georgetown over the weekend.
Yep, as I mentioned, men's volleyball will face King and Pfeiffer. Tennis teams back in it. They're both playing LaSalle and CNU, both on Saturday and Sunday, respectively. And also, women's lacrosse, they'll be playing Georgetown on Wednesday and then Longwood on Saturday.
So a lot of action this week and plenty of home games, so come on out, cheer on your teams. You'll probably see at least one of us at one of those games, whether it's lacrosse or baseball. So come on out and enjoy. There'll be a lot of good stuff to watch. I know I'll be there.
Yep. Had a lot to talk about this week. So now that it is NCAA March Madness time for many of you, we'll go ahead and announce that Mason Sports Insider will be hosting a bracket challenge on ESPN this upcoming week. Test your knowledge against Dan and myself. Well, see how you do. It probably won't be good. Right now, I have my Final Four: UNC, Kansas, Michigan State, and Texas A&M. Have you even filled out the bracket yet?
My Final Four is undisclosed because I'm not allowing anybody to know until the games begin.
Okay, that's a cop-out. But anyways, that is all we got for you this week. Make sure to check out our graphic sponsor and medium provider, Giant Killer, at their website, giantkiller.co. Until next time, I'm Tyler Byram alongside Dan Ward, and we will see you guys next week.